The great hall of the Virulon Empire was quiet and cold, the walls made of smooth black stone that hummed with power. High above the golden throne sat Emperor Zoroth, his face hard, his eyes like frozen stars. The room held nobles, generals, and watchers from other worlds, but none dared to speak before him. Stood Princess Lyra, her hands behind her back, her voice calm but firm. She had just returned from Earth, and now she stood alone against the weight of her entire bloodline. She said the humans were not weak, she said. Their ways were different, but not wrong, she said. They felt things deeply, and that feelings were not signs of failure, but signs of strength. The nobles whispered. The generals frowned. Someone laughed, but it was the nervous kind of laugh, the kind that dies quickly in a room full of tension. Emperor Zoroth did not move for a long time. He looked down at her, his own daughter, and said nothing. Then slowly he raised one hand and pointed to the door. Leave the hall. His voice was sharp, cold, final. Lyra did not move right away. She stood tall, her silver armor catching the lights from the high walls. She had no fear in her eyes. Just quiet, fire. Your silence will not stop the truth, she said, and then she turned and walked away, her long dark cape trailing behind her like a shadow. The doors closed behind her, and the hall began to shake. Not from sound, not from movement, but from something deeper. Later that night, Lyra sat alone in her chambers, far above the city lights of Varela Prime, stars blinking outside her window. Her fingers touched the small stone. Reese had given her a simple earth stone with her name carved on it. She had told no one about the stone, no one about the hug, no one about how her heart had felt like it would break. When she left, Reese had not asked for anything. He had just smiled and held her hand for a moment, and said, "Be strong." She whispered the words now to herself. Be strong. The palace was still, but her mind was not outside in the galaxy. The news had already spread. The human diplomat Captain Reese Carter had made contact like no other. The virulent princess had not just visited Earth, she had spoken against her own court worlds. Watched and listened. Some called her a traitor, some called her a bridge between stars. Messages flooded in from traders, scholars, peacekeepers, even warriors who had grown tired of war. And in the shadows, not everyone liked this change on Earth. Reese stood before a small crowd outside the human dome, his voice calm but his body tense. He knew the Empire would not forget what Lyra had done, and neither would those who feared peace. He looked up at the sky and wondered if she was looking down too, if she felt the same strange pull in her chest. Then the shot came, a single blast from a rooftop, quick and sharp. People screamed, guards shouted. Reese dropped to one knee as pain surged through his side. He reached for his cum and managed one word: Lyra, back on Varela. The message reached Lyra through a private line, the one only she and Reese used. The guards did not know she had it. The court did not know she still talked to him. She read the message, then read it again, and her face turned pale. Without a word, she stood and called her old pilot, Joran, a man loyal to her since her first days at the academy. Prepare my ship, she said. Joran looked at her with wide eyes. The Emperor lie said, prepare my ship, she repeated. Hours later, her silver cruiser broke from the palace bay and shot into space, chased by alarms and warnings and royal orders to return. She did not look back as Earth came into view. Her heart raced. She felt fear, but also something more, something like fire in her blood. When her ship landed near the Earth dome, humans ran to stop her, but she pushed through her guards by her side. She stormed into the hospital, her eyes sharp, her voice firm. No one stopped her. Reese lay on the bed, pale and weak, but alive when he saw her. His eyes widened, not in pain, not in surprise, but in wonder. She walked to him slowly, knelt beside him, and then, without a word, hugged him tight. No armor, no titles, no barriers, just two people from two worlds wrapped in one silent moment that shook the stars outside the room. Reporters captured the image, the hug, seen across 100 systems, and that was how it began. The change, the storm, the fire, the peace. With a hug that no one expected, but no one could forget. Lyra sat beside Reese without saying a word, her hand gently resting near his. He was awake, but tired. Machines beeped around him. Nurses moved in and out, but she did not leave. She had broken protocol, crossed the stars, and disobeyed royal law just to see him, and now that she was here, nothing else mattered. Driss turned his head slightly, his lips curved into a weak smile, and he said, "You?" Lyra nodded, her voice soft. "Of course. I came, no titles, no ranks, just two souls, speaking with no weight of empires between them." Outside the hospital windows, the sun was rising over the green plains of Earth. Guards from both sides watched each other with tension. Whispers passed between soldiers and officers. The Relan High Guard had followed her ship. Hours later, they stood outside, now demanding her return, but Earth officials refused to hand her over. Inside the hospital, Earth's president arrived in person. She spoke with Lyra in private. and asked what happens now. Lyra looked out the window and said, I do not know, but I will not be silenced again. In the Virulent capital, the Emperor sat in his war room, his face like stone, his hands gripping the edges of the long black table. She has gone too far, he said. She has touched the human again in public. The damage is done. The council murmured, some angry, some afraid. One of them, a younger noble, said, perhaps this is a chance. Perhaps we should speak instead of punish. The Emperor stood and his voice echoed, she has chosen the path of fire. She will return, or she will burn with them back. On Earth, Lyra received a new message. It was not from the Emperor, it was from her younger brother, Prince Kale. He had always been quiet, thoughtful. Now his message was short and strange. Be careful, sister. Not all enemies were armored. At night, Earth satellites picked up a strange signal near Mars. Not a ship, not a weapon, just a shadow in the dark. Something moved, then vanished. Grease was healing slowly, but he could see the tension in the air around him. Soldiers held rifles tighter. People looked over their shoulders. Even nurses spoke in whispers. Did not leave his side except once to walk in the garden alone, under the stars. Her face unreadable. She passed the statue of the first human explorer, and paused, her hand brushing the cold stone behind. Her voice spoke soft and sharp at the same time. You are brave, but not wise, princess. She turned fast, her hand near her belt, but the figure who spoke was not armed. He was a Virellan monk in dark robes, his eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. What do you want? She asked. To warn you, he said. There are those within your own court who have waited for this moment. They want war, not peace. They want to control Earth, not befriended. Lyra stepped closer. Who sent you? He shook his head and faded into the night, leaving behind only a small device on the bench where he sat. She picked it up and returned to Reese, who was now sitting up and reading reports. She handed him the device and said, I think something worse is coming. Isk looked at the device, then at her, his voice low and steady. I believe Ulita. They gathered with Earth leaders in a secure room, showing them the device. It held a recording images of Virellan warships hidden near asteroid belts and names of high nobles behind a secret attack plan. The plan was simple: start a false war, make Earth strike first, then crush them. In retaliation, Lyra's hands clenched as she listened. Betrayal burned in her chest. Her own people, her own council. Earth officials were shocked but not surprised. They had always kept weapons ready, just in case. Now they turned to Lyra and asked what she would do. She did not answer right away. Then she said, I will stop them, even if I must face my own father. Alonris placed a hand over hers. We will not let you face this alone. Across the stars, whispers turned into waves and waves into storms. News spread of the recording of the princess's stand of the human. She chose to protect some. Cheered some planned their next move, and far away in a hidden chamber, the true enemy smiled, for they had waited years for this moment, and now all the pieces were moving just right. The silence would not last. The storm was coming, and it would begin with the one thing no one could stop. A choice made, not by a soldier, but by a princess who dared to hug a human. The Virulent cruiser shimmered in orbit above Earth, its hull lined with gold and blue markings. The ship was silent from the outside, but inside it carried voices full of anger, fear, and secret princes. Lyra stood at the center of the Earth Defense Council room, her hands open, her eyes steady. The device she had brought sat on the table, casting faint blue light across the room. She spoke with strength. The voices of the traitors echoed from the device, naming targets, naming times, naming the human cities they planned to strike. The human leaders sat in shock, some furious, some afraid, but none doubted her. Now President Arden leaned forward and said, if this is true, then we must act first. Lyra shook her head. That is what they want. If you strike first, the Virellan throne can declare righteous war. Earth will burn, and no one will speak for peace again. Reese was sitting beside her, still healing, still pale, but sharp, his voice calm. We let her go back, he said. She speaks to them face to face. Room erupted. Some yelled, some shouted. She is a target. They said she will be killed on sight. But Lyra raised one hand, and silence fell. Let me go back. I know the halls. I know who to trust. President Arden looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Slowly. You leave at dawn. Later that night, Lyra stood on the roof of the Earth Dome, her eyes on the stars. Reese stepped beside her and said, you know, this could be a trap. She nodded. I know. Then why go? He asked. Because if I do not, then others will die, and I will never forgive myself. He touched her arm gently and said, then do one thing before you leave. She looked at him, puzzled. Come with me. He led her through a quiet hallway to a room filled with floating lights, Earth's memorial for the lost. Each light a name, each name a soul. She stood in silence, surrounded by human loss, human sacrifice, and then she understood more than she ever had. These people fought not for power, not for empire, but for each other. She whispered, I will not let more names be added to this room. The next day her ship left Earth flying through the black quiet of space, guided by hope and shadow as she approached the edge of Virilon space. She sent a message to her brother, Kale-coded hidden the words, simple, I am coming, do not trust the council. But when she reached the outer gates, no reply came, only silence. Her ship was hailed by royal guards. Voice cold and clipped, you were ordered to return to the central tower. Alone, your escort will follow behind. Do not try to land anywhere else. She gave a small nod to her pilot and said do as they asked. City below looked the same, but felt different. Lights still danced across the towers, and hovercrafts zipped through the sky, but the joy was gone, replaced by watching eyes and hidden guns. Her ship touched down on the private platform of the Emperor's tower. Guards surrounded it. At once she stepped out alone, wearing no armor, just a simple dark robe, the same color as the night. A man waited at the steps. Not her father, not Kalit, was Lord Vaxon, head of the royal guard, and one of the voices in the recording. Welcome back, princess, he said, voice smooth, eyes sharp. Lyra bowed slightly and said, I came to speak with my father. Of course, he said, but first, come with. Mesh walked beside him, heart pounding. He led her through familiar halls that now felt strange, their walls silent, as if holding secrets instead of the throne room. He took her down into the old levels below the palace. She stopped. This is not the way, he smiled, cold and cruel. We have changed the way. Suddenly, guards closed in from behind, weapons drawn. Her wrists grabbed her belt, pulled away. She fought hard, kicked one guard down, slammed another into the wall, but they were too many and her strength was not enough. They dragged her into a dark chamber and sealed the door. The lights inside flickered, and the air smelled of metal and dust. She stood in the center, breathing heavy, and stared at the man who stepped forward from the shadows. It was not her father. It was her uncle, General Threx, long thought dead, exiled after the Battle of Neros. He grinned, sharp teeth glinting under the lights. Oh, the Peace Princess returns. Do you think hugs will save you? Here Lyra said nothing, just stared with fire in her eyes. He stepped closer and said, you were always soft, always weak. But now you are useful. She asked, what do you want? He smiled again. I want Earth to burn, and I want you to light the match. The trap had been waiting, and now it had its prize. But Lyra was not just a symbol, she was a flame, and flames do not die easy. Asterisk. The cell was cold, the walls smooth and without seams, no windows, no visible doors. The lights pulsed faintly with each heartbeat of the palace above. Princess Lyra sat on the floor, breathing slowly, her hands still bound behind her back. The taste of blood in her mouth told her how hard they wanted her to break, but she would not. General Threx stood outside the invisible shield, watching her with eyes like blades. His voice slid into the chamber through the cum wall like oil over water. You could have ruled beside us, he said. You could have had planets bow to your name instead. You bowed to a human, and now you rot. Lyra said nothing, her face calm, her mind racing. She had memorized the guards who dragged her into had virulent markings. One had a burn scar on the left wrist and limped slightly. She stored the detail away like a blade in her hand. Threx stepped closer. Now, the true game begins. We have taken your brother. He will speak against you before the court. Lyra blinked but did not flinch. He continued, our ships will attack Earth colonies soon. Earth will respond, and we will strike the homeworld, then declare you a traitor for leaking our war files. Still, she said nothing. Threx smirked. Silence suits you, princess. When the fire begins, no one will remember your hug. No one will care about peace. The shield blinked off just for a second as Threx walked away, and in that blink, Lyra saw it, a flicker of motion in the wall corner, too smooth to be dust and not part of the room. She leaned forward slowly, pressing her bound wrists against the metal floor, testing pressure, finding weakness. Pain lanced through her arms, but she kept going. Breath steady, eyes locked on the corner outside the palace. A lone drone zipped past scanners flying close to the rooftops. It moved like a shadow, avoiding sat in a command chair aboard a cloaked shuttle, his eyes locked on the monitor. He had followed the princess despite orders he had taken. A risk others refused. Beside him sat Jorin, her loyal pilot, and one more figure, a human tech girl named Kess. Quick hands, fast-mind eyes, always scanning. Reese asked again, can you break the palace systems? Kess chewed her lip. Maybe not all of it, but I can blink the lower levels for 90 seconds, maybe enough if she's alive. She is. Reese said she has to be back. In the cell, Lyra finally found a seam, thin, barely visible but real. She shifted. Her weight pressed against it, using her shoulder as a wedge. Her breath came fast, now not from fear, but from effort. The lights above flickered. Then a sound hissed in her ear. Princess, this is Kess. We're blinking your sector now. Move. When the lights dropped, Lyra smiled for the first time in hours. She whispered, thank you. The lights died. The shield vanished him. She moved. She slammed her body into the seam. The panel groaned and broke loose. She crawled through a tight shaft, scraped skin on metal, but she kept going. Behind her, guards shouted. Someone fired a pulse blast that missed by inches ahead. She saw a faint blue light, the hallway where she once walked in silk robes. Now she ran barefoot, bleeding, but a Litrin met her at the corner. He tossed her a blade and a cum. She clipped a cum to her collar and said to Reese, "I'm out." His voice filled her ear with relief. "And firehead for the hangar. We've got a way out, but we have to move fast. They're calling the fleet." Alarms screamed across. The palace floors shook as soldiers ran in every direction. In the throne chamber, General Threx slammed his fist into a control panel. "Bring her back," he shouted. "Seal the exits. Lock the skybutt." Lyra was already on the move, her eyes like fire, her voice shouting orders to loyal guards who still remembered her true name. Some followed her, others turned away, but none dared face her blade at the hangar bay. A sleek fighter waited, painted in Virilon blue, but powered by human tech. Kess waved from inside. Cockpit-ready engines. Humming stood at the ramp, gun in hand. When he saw her, he smiled and said, "You're late." She stepped aboard and said, "I had to fight a ghost ass." The fighter lifted into the sky. Palace towers, lit up with fire pulse cannons, tracked them, but the ship twisted, dodged, vanished into the clouds behind them. Varela began to burn, not from attack, but from truth, spreading in every direction. The princess had escaped. The traitors were exposed, and across the stars, a single message went out: she is not Dunand, neither is peace. The ship cut through space like a silver flame, stars blurring past the cockpit. As Lyra stood behind the pilot seat, her hands clenched around the backrest, her eyes locked on the forward screen. Reese sat in the co-pilot chair, speaking quietly into the com. "We're 20 minutes from the neutral relay station. If we can reach it, we can broadcast to all systems without interference." Joran said nothing, his focus on flying, while Kess tapped at her console, fingers moving fast as code danced across the screen. Lear's voice broke the silence. "Is Kale alive?" Reese turned to her. "Yes, he's alive. But barely." His signal was faint. "They're keeping him in the mountain hold under the northern city." She took a deep breath, not just to stay calm, but to hold back the weight in her chest. "He is strong," she whispered, "but he needs Miris." Gave her a look, one part pride, one part pain. "We all do." The ship neared the old neutral relay station, a floating structure left over from the last Alliance war. Its long arms broken in places, but its core still active. It was outside all borders, out of reach of both Earth and Virilon law, and if they sent a message from there, no one could block it, no one could twist the truth. "The moment we start broadcasting," Kess said, "they'll know where we are, and they'll come fast." Lyra nodded. "Then we speak fast and speak loud." The ship docked with a metal groan. The corridor lights flickered as they entered the main control room. Ancient but still functional. Kess plugged in her gear and began decoding the com array. She looked up at Lyra. "All set. When you're ready." Lyra stepped forward. The camera activated. The red light blinked. The feed began spreading across hundreds of systems. She stood tall, her voice steady. "This is Princess Lyra of Virilari. Speak not as a ruler, not as a soldier, but as someone who has seen too much blood." She held up the recording, the one that exposed the plot, the betrayal, the names of those who had planned the false war. "This is the truth," she said. "Our enemy is not Earth, our enemy is not difference, our enemy is fear, and those who use it to take power." She looked directly into the lens. "I have been called a traitor, but I say traitors are those who kill peace and hide behind flags." Behind her, Reese stood silent, but firm, a symbol of unity that no one could ignore. "To the citizens of both Earth and Varela," she said, "stand up. Do not let the war begin. Do not believe the fire they will show." Youth camera blinked once more, then shut off. Kess turned pale. Their Kamingaran shouted, "5 warships, inbound Virilon class." Reese grabbed Lyra's hand. "We need to move now." Raced back to the ship, alarms blaring behind them, the hangar shaking from incoming blasts. The shuttle broke free just before the relay station exploded, a blast of white and gold filling the stars behind them. Kess shouted, "I sent the message through 5 mirror nodes. Even if they destroy one, the rest will carry a trace." Looked at Lyra. "They heard you, but now we need to survive. The warships were closing in fast." Lyra turned to Joran. "Where is the nearest hidden base?" Joran pulled up a map, a moon base used by traders, old but hidden. "Set course," she ordered. They punched through the gravity wave, dodging plasma bolts as the stars shifted again back on Varela. Chaos had already begun. The message had hit every screen from Farm Dome to Palace. Citizens stopped in the streets, generals stared at their monitors, and nobles argued in panicking. The throne hall Emperor Zoreth sat silent, the red light from the message, still glowing on the wallscape, was still alive. He now spoke from a secured cell. "Weak but brave father. he said through a cracked voice. If you let this war begin, then we are lost. The Emperor closed his eyes for the first time in years, unsure of what to do. Somewhere near the outer colonies, people painted the human's face on walls with the words, "Peace through fire." Others whispered the name of the princess, not with hate, but with hope. Back on the shuttle, Lyra sat in silence, her hand resting on Reese's. He looked at her and said, "You did it." She shook her head. "Not yet." Reese gave a soft smile. "Then let's finish it together." The stars around them shifted again. The path ahead, dangerous, the fire still rising, but the message had flown, and now it could not be stopped, not by kings, not by fleets, not even by war itself. Asterisk. The hidden moonbase came into view, as a gray shadow behind the gas giant, its surface smooth and dull with only one entrance, marked by flickering lights and an old code. Biakanjoran guided the shuttle into the docking tunnel, slow and careful, his hands firm on the controls. Lyra sat with her arms crossed, her thoughts heavy, her eyes locked on the fading stars behind them. Reese leaned forward. "What is this place?" "An old trade outpost," she said, "used before the First Virellan War. My uncle told me about it when I was a child. No one uses it now, no one except ghosts and smugglers." As the shuttle touched down, dust swirled in the chamber outside. No alarms, no greeting, just silence, and Coldcast stepped out, first scanning the air, breathable but barely. The others followed, weapons ready, lights cutting through the darkness. Inside the base they found old crates, empty bunks, broken lights, everything covered in layers of dust. Joran activated the emergency core, and lights buzzed on, slowly revealing the main hall and a few working systems. They locked the entrance, set motion sensors, and sat down around the old table inside. Placed a small stone from Earth on the center of the table. She stared at it, as if searching for strength. Inside its carved name, "We sent the truth," she said, "but the truth is only the start." Seas nodded. "Messages spread fast, but fear spreads faster." He checked his Earth forces are standing by, but they will not strike unless fired on, and Virellan ships are moving close to border space. It's a thin. Linegerin brought up a new report. Someone tried to shut down the mirror nodes. The message almost failed. Lyra looked up. Someone inside the palace still wants this war, no matter what. They stayed in the base for hours, listening, waiting, watching distant signals shift as the stars turned. Then a sound came, not from outside, but from deep within the base. A hum, then a crackle, then a voice. "Hello." They froze, weapons drawn, eyes alert. The voice came again, weak, slow, unsure. "Is someone there?" Kess moved fast to the console, tracing the signal. "It's coming from beneath us." Lower level. Lyra was already moving down a stairwell, flashlight in hand, her blade drawn. The lower level was colder, the lights dim, only the red emergency line glowing along the wall. In the far corner she found a sealed door, half open, sparks flicking from the edge. Inside lay a figure wrapped in a torn cloak, breathing slow, and shallow silver markings on his face barely visible. She stepped closer, eyes wide. "Kayla." Her brother looked up, his eyes glazed, but still sharp. He tried to rise, but collapsed. Agengerin ran in behind her and helped lift Kale onto his feet. They carried him upstairs, wrapped in blankets, set him down gently, and gave him water. He spoke slowly, voice dry. "They brought me here, after I refused to read the false statement. They beat me, and left me to die. But someone disabled the door, someone I never saw." Lyra looked at Reese. "We are not alone." Kale smiled faintly. "I saw messages before the power failed. People are speaking your name, sister. They are not calling you a traitor. They are calling you the last." Hopris paced near the window, then turned to them. "We need to do more than speak. We need to make them choose." Lyra looked at the dusty star map on the wall, and traced her fingers toward the central system. "The mirror gathering," she whispered, "the neutral ground where leaders from smaller systems meet once a year to trade and talk. It starts in today's. If we go there," she said, "and show the evidence, show Kale, and show the truth in front of every world, they cannot hide it anymore." Kliss looked worried. "The gathering is public and exposed. That is why it will work," Lyra said. "Let them see us. Let them try to stop us in front of everyone." Reese nodded, slow and serious. "They will either silence you or lose everything they built on lies." Kale looked at his sister and said, "Take me with you. You are weak." She said, "I am still a voice, and they need to hear." Minogren ran another systems check, then stood ready. "We can reach the gathering, if we leave now." The team gathered their gear, prepared the shuttle, and helped Kale into the CTAS. The ship lifted off the old base, faded into the dust again, and the stars opened ahead. This time they were not just running, they were flying straight into the fire, but now the fire belonged to them. The shuttle emerged from hyperspace above the neutral zone, a wide stretch of calm stars surrounding the mirror, gathering a city of ships floating around a hollow metal ring, each vessel marked by a different worlds, flagged dozens of smaller crafts buzzed between the station's broadcasting voices, in hundreds of languages, trade offers, peace requests, and quiet warnings. Lyra stood behind the pilot's seat, her cloak wrapped tight around her shoulders. Kale sat beside her, pale but upright, his eyes tired but steady. Rhys moved through the cabin, checking weapons and systems, but he kept glancing at Lyra. You sure about this? He asked one last time. She looked at him, her voice calm. I was sure the moment I left the palace. Kes flicked a few switches and said, we've got 5 minutes before the central gathering starts. They expect a speech from Virulin. Leadership. Durin turned the shuttle toward the docking ring and said then, let's crash the party with style. The ship landed with the His guards from smaller planets stepped forward, weapons ready but not raised. They did not know if this arrival was danger or diplomacy. Lyra stepped out first, walking slow, her head high. She did not wear armor. She did not bring banners. She only brought the truth. Behind her came Kale, walking with help, but refusing to sit down. Rhys followed, Lass's face unreadable, but his hands tight at his sides. Inside the Grand Chamber, leaders from over 40 worlds filled the circle chamber, voices rising and falling in confusion. As the Princess of Virella entered without invitation, the host stepped forward, a tall woman from the Freen worlds, her voice curious. Princess Lyra, what is the meaning of this? Lyra spoke clear and strong. I come to speak, not as royalty, but as warning. I come to stop a lie from becoming warsome. Shouted. Some whispered, others leaned forward, drawn in by the fire in her voice. She raised the data crystal and said, this holds the proof. Names, dates, weapons, all created by those who wish to start war with Earth without cause. Kale stepped forward and said, I was taken. I was beaten because I would not lie for them. The host looked at them and said, we need to verify. Stepped forward, her voice fast and firm. Then verify. I brought copies. I brought encryption logs. I brought the words of traitors in their own voices. The room went still. The Freenos called her aides, and they began the scan. The data came alive on the central screeners. The images and files appeared. Murmurs rose across the room. Names high in the virulent court, names whispered in shadows, names tied to war machines hidden near Earth. Gasp echoed when the map showed the fleet waiting in the shadows of Saturn. One by one, leaders turned toward Lyra, not with suspicion, but with silence. Then the door slammed open. Virulent soldiers stormed in, led by Lord Vaxin, his voice like thunder. Princess Lyra, you are under arrest for treason. He raised a weapon, pointed it at Kale. The crowd stood frozen. Lyra stepped forward fast, her voice sharp. You raise a weapon in a neutral chamber. You declare war not just on Earth, but on every world. Here the Freen host stood with her hand raised. This chamber is protected. You will lower your weapon, or you will be removed. Vaxin laughed, cold and cruel, then turned the weapon toward Lyra. He never fight. Rhys stepped forward, placing himself between Lyra and the barrel, his voice low and calm. If you shoot her, you shoot peace. Itsil. Vaxin sneered and said, you think a human can stop? Lyra stepped beside Rhys and said, no, but we can't. She reached out and took Rhys's hand on. Then she pulled him close and hugged him in front of every screen, every camera, every leader. The crowd fell silent. It was not just a gesture, it was a choice. Virelin princess, hugging a human before the eyes of the galaxy. The image flashed across the stars in seconds. In that moment, the weapons lowered, not by force, but by shame. Vaxin was arrested by gathering guards. Kale was taken to safety. Rhys stood speechless as the weight of history settled in the silence. Later, the Freen host made it official. The war plans were revealed to the galaxy. Earth was cleared of Blame Man. Princess Lyra was offered a new title, not ruler, not general, not spy, but voice of unity between stars. As they walked back toward the shuttle, Rhys looked at her and said, you never told me why you hugged me the first time. Lyra smiled. I didn't plan it. You just felt human, and now you feel like home. The stars above burned brighter than ever, and peace finally had a face, the face of a princess and the man she chose to hug when everyone else bowed.